Fallout 3 is something that I'm not very well versed with. I'm just going to let you know that right off the bat. I have only played through this game a couple of times, and that's honestly because I didn't enjoy this game as much as I did with Fallout New Vegas. But between this and Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 3 seems to be the game that appears more likely that we'll see a remake of in the future. Fallout 3 to me has always been the game that I look at and kind of avoid just because of how old the game looks and plays in comparison to its brother, Fallout New Vegas. That feels so much smoother in 2024, and it took me until the Fallout TV show to decide to go back and play Fallout 3. Keep in mind, I am playing this on the Xbox Series X and I do not have a fancy computer with all of those complicated mod menus to enhance the graphics or the way the game plays. So everything I talk about is going to be strictly from my eyeballs to my smooth brain. In other words, from my own experience. That doesn't mean I hate the game in any way, because that is far from the truth. I have enjoyed my time with the game so far, and I believe that it is what made the Fallout franchise that it is today. But let's get into it. I'm going to break this video up into separate parts. I still haven't figured out the chapters for YouTube yet, but to make this video a bit easier to digest, I will put a timestamp pinned comment down below. So for starters, I'm going to be talking about the history, development, story, fan reception, release, and then my final thoughts at the end of the video. Let's get started. So for starters, the origin of Fallout 3 dates back to the cancellation of Fallout Van Buren, which was being developed by Black Isle Studio, the people who eventually became Obsidian Entertainment. And if you remember from my Fallout New Vegas video, these guys were a side studio from Interplay Entertainment, who created the franchises Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. These guys actually were in the middle of working on Baldur's Gate 3 when the company layoff started from Interplay, and unfortunately, it was cancelled after the lead developer resigned from the company. Josh Sawyer, who was a key designer for Fallout New Vegas, took over the work on Baldur's Gate 3, but eventually he was asked to retool the engine to create Van Buren. But Josh Sawyer would resign shortly after because of Interplay's mismanagement. Josh had tried multiple times to get his work on Van Buren reviewed by the company, but got no response. He would later say in other interviews that it basically made me think they had either no interest or no care in what we were doing. The cancellation of Van Buren would lead to Bethesda buying the license for Fallout 3, and the assets from Van Buren would be repurposed for New Vegas. At the time Bethesda bought the Fallout license, they were only known for their Elder Scrolls games, and they actually wanted to expand their catalog with a new game. They ended up turning down offers from other companies. Well, ZeniMax turned down other offers from other companies that wanted to work on Fallout 3, but eventually it was decided that Bethesda would work on it themselves. The development began in late 2004 with a small team of 10, and this was because of their work on Elder Scrolls Oblivion. After the release of Elder Scrolls Oblivion, the team increased drastically to around 75 people. I'm so sorry for the way I pronounce this guy's name, but after the work on Fallout 3 finished, the devs noted in many interviews that they struggled working on the franchise because they had no prior knowledge. Bethesda's mindset was to work on the game as if they created the original game themselves. Actually, while they worked on Fallout 3, they used a model of Fallout 1 as an example to work towards. The story, which was written by lead writer Emil Pagriulo, stated that the story was created early on in development and was expanded on more when more people joined the project. Emil loved the oppressive and bleak atmosphere of the first Fallout game, in contrast to the excessive and camp dialogue of Fallout 2. He wanted to add rawness to the dialogue and occasional profanity. Another goal was to add moral ambiguity to some of the choices the players could make throughout the game. Gavin Carter actually stated that the karma system was added so that players would be able to know the immediate consequences of their actions, and this would make players question which would be the correct way to play. This is something that would stick with the franchise for many years to come. When the game was on the verge of releasing, many journalists would joke that Fallout 3 would just be like Oblivion, but with guns.
Stop! You violated the law!
Bethesda actually wanted to avoid the confusion and wanted to make this game stand out on its own, so Bethesda would add many elements of first-person shooters to the game while allowing players to have some tactical combat as you would in an RPG. Todd Howard said that they wanted to have both real-time and turn-based combat, which led to the creation of the VAT system, which would also become a staple in the franchise. They created this with the idea that they wanted the slow-motion effects to be cinematic. The shooting mechanics were considered to be one of the weaker elements in Fallout 3, mainly because the development team, they were not experts in first-person shooters. This makes a ton of sense because I could not stand how the guns worked in Fallout 3. I'll talk about that more later on in the video. The setting of the game was actually one of the biggest points of contention among developers because they had their own ideas as to where they wanted the game to take place. Originally, the game was going to take place on the West Coast, but since Bethesda is based out of Rockville, Maryland, they decided to make the game take place in Washington, D.C. Also because some of the devs are from there, and they wanted to make it a difficult area to explore. The game engine also only allowed them to split the area up and have it all connect through the subway system, which was absolutely hated by playtesters because it made the game less enjoyable to play, and Bethesda tried to remove it, but the concept had to be dropped. Many of the developers actually said afterwards that that was one of their biggest mistakes with Fallout 3, was because of its location. If they had done a proper playtest, it could have yielded different results and it could have changed entirely. I'm not sure what a proper playtest is in comparison to what was done, but I kind of agree in that regards, because I get the same feeling with this game that it's very difficult to navigate. The map size was also around the same size as the map in Elder Scrolls Oblivion when the project started, so Bethesda would actually put in landmarks to help players navigate through the map. For example, the Washington Monument can be seen from Vault 101, helping the players to understand that the game takes place in DC. They eventually had to increase the map size by 20% and spread out some of the locations so that players wouldn't discover certain areas too early in the game. They would spread out enemy encounters too so that it wouldn't overwhelm the players. Also, the White House apparently didn't make an appearance because it was too late to add that in, and they had to tie it into the story saying that it would be a significant target for a nuclear strike, so they just left it as a giant crater. Believe it or not, Bethesda at the time set a world record with the amount of dialogue lines that were recorded for the game. For 2008, that was 40,000 lines of dialogue, which I'm sure was quickly beaten after that, but that was basically all of the work that went into the game before it was released. It's actually wild to learn some of this information as I'm writing this because there's a lot of information that I did not know going into this video. I hope you guys learned some new things here and there, but one of the big things for me actually was learning that Liam Neeson voiced the dad in Fallout. I always thought that was a joke because, the dude sounds like Liam Neeson, but when I found out that shit was actually true, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. But let's get into the rest of the video. We're going to be doing the plot of the story next. So the story, at least in the beginning, takes place in Vault 101, which is taking place in the Capital Wasteland afterwards in 2275, which is almost 200 years after the Great War, which was a war between the US and China where nuclear bombs were dropped, basically ruining the entire world. When the game starts, you're basically in the middle of ripping your mother in half, and she dies from this, so you are raised by your father, who is Liam Neeson, and he's teaching you all the skills that you're going to need to survive the wasteland. After the Lone Wanderer reaches the age of 19, the player's father will actually leave to go get a pack of cigarettes. Ah, shit. So the father basically leaves without any explanation, and the son goes out into the wasteland after him. Along the way, the Lone Wanderer learns about their father's background from other characters, including residents from the nearby settlement Megaton, radio DJ Three Dog, and the scientist Madison Lee. Before the Lone Wanderer's birth, James and his wife Catherine had actually been working on Project Purity, in which a water purifier built in the Jefferson Memorial would have purified the irradiated water in the tidal basin and the Potomac River. However, Catherine died during childbirth, and James abandoned the project to raise his child in Vault 101. The character makes his way into Vault 112 and gets stuck in a virtual reality simulator, and this is where the character finds his father. This is my favorite part of the game, by the way. I just absolutely love this shit. Once the character escapes and helps his dad get out of the simulator, James's father explains that he left the vault so that he could restart Project Purity and help rebuild the world using GECK, or the Gardens of Eden Creation Kit. The Enclave want to use Project Purity to poison and kill any mutated organisms that drink the water, including humans. This will eventually lead to James sacrificing himself for the water purifier, and this leads to the Lone Wanderer to enlist the help of the Brotherhood of Steel. The Lone Wanderer finds the GECK kit in Vault 87, but is captured by the Enclave and is brought to Raven Rock. The player escapes the imprisonment, but we meet President Eden, who turns out to be artificial intelligence. The President gives the player the virus and asks them to insert it into Project Purity. The player can optionally cause the AI to self-destruct if you decide to leave. Together with the Brotherhood of Steel, the Lone Wanderer retakes the Jefferson Memorial. This is when you find out that the water purifier needs to be manually activated. James activated, and James the father, activated a protocol that filled the chamber with radiation. You are then presented with 3 options for an ending. 1. The Lone Wanderer sacrifices himself. 2. The Lone Wanderer inserts the poison. 3. The Lone Wanderer sends in a Brotherhood of Steel member. There's actually also a 4th option you can get if you have the Broken Steel DLC, and this is where you can send in a radiation-resistant person to activate or destroy the water purifier. That's going to wrap up the story for the game. This next part is going to be based around the release, and this is going to have a lot of my likes and dislikes about the game. Fallout 3 was announced back in 2004 when Bethesda had bought the rights from Interplay for over $1 million, and little to no information was shared about the game afterwards, which is actually what made the hype for the game go up so high. This was until around April 2007 when a teaser trailer would release, but this was before the game would finally release October 28, 2008. During its first week of sales, the game would go on to sell 4.7 million copies worldwide and would gross over $300 million. The game outsold every previous Fallout game combined, and the sales were stronger than Elder Scrolls Oblivion. A research company actually said that as of 2015, Fallout 3 has sold over 12.4 million copies, which is absolutely insane when you look at the numbers. Fallout 3 actually got hit with censorship in countries like Australia, who outright refused to give it a classification because of its realistic depiction of drug use. Bethesda had to remove the morphine and replace it with another generic drug, and remove the needle injection movement. It was also removed from Japan because, obviously it's nuclear weaponry, Germany because of its excessive blood and gore, and Microsoft chose not to release the game in India because of the cultural sensitivities. The game either had to be altered or quests had to be removed to make the game work. But eventually, it worked out in some cases. This was such a big release because many fans of the franchise had been waiting eagerly for a new entry and to see how Bethesda would handle the game. Most people also thought that nothing good would come from Bethesda buying the IP and they would run it into the ground, and I guess they were kind of right about that. Oops. The game was reviewed by critics at a 9 out of 10, which was basically the same across the board for all the other review companies, which a 9 out of 10 in 2008, and in today's society we can't even get above a fucking 7 or a 6? Like, this is a miracle here. It was actually considered the 4th highest rated game of 2008, which to me is unbelievable. OneUp.com had this to say about it. Damian Lin praised its open-ended gameplay and flexible character leveling system. While the VAT system was called fun, enemy encounters were said to suffer from lack of precision in real-time combat. IGN actually praised its minimalist design, and you might find yourself with nothing but the sound of wind rustling through decaying trees and blowing dust across the barren plains. Fallout 3 proves that less can be more. The review noted that unusual amount of realism combined with endless conversation permutations produces one of the most truly interactive experiences of the generation. Which, these are just the big reviewers. Fallout 3 is universally loved by fans of the Fallout series. New Vegas is another one, but Fallout 3 is absolutely loved, and it's honestly because whether we want to admit it or not, Bethesda is the reason why this game is as big as it is now, and for most people, this was the first Fallout game a lot of people played. Even though the game is loved by fans, there are some criticisms that people have that they needed to make mods just to fix. Some of these issues I've seen for myself while playing the game, and I had to play on console, so I couldn't even use the fancy mod menus to fix my game. So these are some of the issues that either I had or many players had, but the first one is the shooting mechanics. I talked about this a little bit earlier in the video. It's one of my main concerns with the game because, I mean, this is something that can be fixed with mods or can be explained because of Bethesda's lack of knowledge around FPS mechanics, but it's one of the main problems that even the developers of the game have acknowledged about this game after it was released, and this was something that I experienced for myself and thought it was a valid criticism at this point. The subway design is the next one. I brought this up earlier too. The devs acknowledged that the map was a huge criticism because, I mean, personally, when I tried to play this game many years ago, I stopped because of the subway. And it was just such a complicated and boring task to do, and it was important to progress in the story and do most of the quests in the game, so I'm glad that they acknowledge this because it makes my concern valid. I hope that when they remaster the game, they decide to rework this system. So this might be where the comment section turns on me, like I'm Homer Simpson in the Simpsons movie, but poor writing. This game suffers from it so hard, and honestly, I don't like the characters you interact with in the game. Not only do the characters just feel like empty, bland personalities, but the story does not have a good ending. Everything just feels bland and boring, and it doesn't feel like variety when it comes to making decisions. And when the game director said during his interview, where he emphasizes the amount of options the game has, but in the opening scene, if you decide to kill the Overseer, the worst thing that happens is that you won't be allowed to visit later on. And I would have expected that they try to kill you later, or follow you and try to track you down, but there's just nothing here, and they just get mad and don't allow you back in, and it just, for the game to have a lot of choices, every choice kind of feels like this. In Fallout New Vegas, if you make a choice that results in death, a whole town will hate you and even shoot at you if they see you. Even Fallout 2 had choices, and they had a huge morality system too. When I played Fallout 3, it feels like they just tried to replicate that, but they did it poorly. And in Fallout 2, all the characters had such a fleshed out background, it doesn't feel like this in Fallout 3. And most of the fans that were probably waiting after Fallout 2 to play Fallout 3 were probably disappointed on launch day. Now the last one is the endings. This was a point that a Reddit user made. I didn't see a problem with the ending at first, but when a lot of people started to mention it, it made me go back and think how much of a letdown the ending was. The ending was very basic. Either you sacrifice yourself or you sacrifice someone else, and that's the bottom line. And this lines up with the story being poorly written. The other games that were in the Fallout series have very memorable and cool endings. I mean, except for 76, but when I look back at this game, it just makes me think that this must have been some kind of test run for them to iron out all the wrinkles in their development. There's a lot of things that have changed between this and what we see in newer Fallout games, but I don't know, this just feels like it was a test run for them. Now, even though there are a lot of things that people don't like about this game, there's also a lot of things that people love this game for. Let me talk about some of those. For starters, most people probably played this as their first Fallout game, and it's because the first two Fallout games were mainly on PC. But the reason why people love it is because they have the memory of playing it for the first time. It reminds them of the good old days. People will always remember the opening scene where you walk out of the vault into the wasteland, and you can see all of the big landmarks as far as the eye can see. This opening scene just really gives you an idea of what to expect from this game. And, you know, don't feel bad if this is your nostalgia game. I have one too, and that's Aliens Colonial Marines. I know it's a bad game, but that's a story for another day, okay? A lot of people also love the exploration in the game, and this was big in terms of what you could expect from a Bethesda game, so there was a vast amount of different locations that could be explored, whether it was the Washington Monument or the Bethesda Ruins. And keep in mind, this is an actual place, by the way. When I played this game, I loved the feeling of walking through the streets of northern DC. It is just such an eerie feeling that never leaves you. I remember the whole time I played this game, I was so nervous about what was going to be in the next room. This game does a very good job of capturing the post-apocalyptic vibe that was actually new for 2008. I can't think of any other games that did this better with like the same kind of like graphics and programming. They have the ash people like Hiroshima did. I'm not sure if that's what you call them, but it basically like the ash piles that are the shape of humans. And the buildings are in complete ruin, and people and animals have been eradicated. It just shows what attention to detail Bethesda had when going into this game. The last one I'll talk about are the DLCs. People love this game for the DLCs, which I can't understand because I've never played them. I recently played the Fallout New Vegas DLC, and those were great. So many people loved the DLC The Pit, which brought you outside of the Capital Wasteland through an underground railroad to a large dungeon area called The Mill. Fallout DLCs are always a blast depending on what game you're playing, but that was another big thing that I've heard mentioned when people say they like Fallout 3, which Fallout has always done very well when it comes to DLCs. The last one I'll do is the enemy design. The one thing that Fallout to me has always done right is create some absolutely scary monsters, and scary NPCs too. This game just has such a huge variety of different enemies that completely will throw you off. For example, the mutants have always scared me when it comes to fighting them because you never know how many there will be in each camp and what kind of weapons that these mutants will have. It makes it scary to go up against them until you have at least leveled up to a point where you can take them on. Even the ghouls look scary, and they talk like they've had their millionth Newport cigarette, which in the right environment is completely terrifying. Now, this game has both good and bad things about it, and at the end of the day, I mean, these are just opinions, you know, and all we can really do is just discuss them and move on. This game is loved enough that people have been asking for a remake, and there was a leaked financial document that came out stating that Bethesda is working on a remake for this game, and I hope this is something that they actually do because this game desperately needs this. But these were all of the valid criticisms and, I mean, things that people absolutely loved about this game. The next thing I do want to talk about is, should you play this game in 2024? And this is just my opinion, so, I mean, don't crucify me for this one. So, I did this in my last video, so I'll put one in this too. This game is so old that it is very hard to play, and my opinion on whether you should play this in 2024, I mean, of course, you know, there's nothing wrong with playing the game, it's just very hard to play if you're playing on PC, because the game is full of constant crashes, bugs, and glitches, so it's really hard for some people to play without the game crashing. But if you're on console, it works as well as the game did in 2008, you know, with all the same problems and whatnot that you can't really fix with any mods. Unfortunately, most of the consoles that you have now won't let you use mods unless it's pre-built in, so you'd have to get like an Xbox 360 or a PS3. That's the only solution I can give. This game is definitely worth playing if you're a fan of the franchise and just want to see where the franchise got its footing after it was bought by Bethesda. This game, even with all those problems, is still worth the time just to play, and even if it's only once, because there's still a lot of story and places to explore. I mean, I'm not a die-hard fan of the game, but that's just my view on it. Now, this is the part of the video where I give you guys my final thoughts on the game. We finally made it here, guys, and if you're still watching, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let me know what your thoughts are down below. Let's get into it. This game has such a rich and troubled past, and it made researching this video a lot of fun to do, because it gave me a lot to discuss, but besides that, I really have enjoyed this game. Even though I've only played this through a couple of times, and I still come back to play every 3 to 4 years. I come back and play just a little bit. Every time I do, I really go out of my way to explore everything. Every building, every character, every hole in the ground. Now, even though I have my issues with this game, it doesn't mean that you will too. I highly recommend checking this game out. Between where the franchise started and where it's at now since being acquired by Bethesda, it makes me wonder whether this game would have been better off dying after Fallout 2, or would have been better off being acquired by somebody else. Until we see the prospects of a new game, we can only hope that they have learned from their mistakes from each game and use those mistakes to make better games. Fallout 76 is the most recent game in the franchise, and that game was a fucking disaster for many people. Even with the NPCs being added, it has only slightly increased the fun that most people have with the game, and a lot of people still hate it. Because of how bad the new games are, it makes going back and playing their old games a good time because it reminds you of what the franchise used to be, and not what the franchise has turned into. Bethesda at this point should just release a remake because, I mean, if they don't plan on releasing a new entry into the series anytime soon, fans are going to go nuts. A remake will at least hold off some of the die-hard players for another 5 years at least. Honestly, who knows though, because so many fans are just so sick of the crap that they've put up with this company, especially after the launch of Fallout 76 and Starfield. A remake might just be the best thing to stop the backlash that they've been receiving from these horrible launches. I personally would just like to see a remake just so I can play a Fallout game with all the new touch-ups of modern technology. But that's all I really have for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button down below and comment what your thoughts are on Fallout 3. Also, if you enjoyed this, please watch another video because that's how the algorithm works, and if you enjoyed this, maybe it'll recommend it to somebody else who does too. I want to make this a channel where the average gamer can have their voice and opinions actually be heard in comparison to the other channels where you feel like you're just screaming into the void. I love reading all of your thoughts and comments down below, but yeah, thanks again for watching guys, and have a good night.